What is your name? By Elton Gar. I am Empress Reina, the seventh ruler of the United Earth, most powerful human who has ever lived, or so they tell me. For most people, they never even consider any other possibilities. I'm Empress Reina, reborn into a new body, so that her rule can continue. For me, I'm Ella Bell, a 14-year-old girl who looks enough like the Empress that when she died, I was chosen as her replacement. And to those who know the truth, what am I? I'm somewhere between a science experiment and the Empress. About 4 years older than they would have preferred, but finding the perfect vessel is difficult. They found me, and hours after I arrived at the palace, they strapped me down and injected me with something. They then unstrapped me, and left me in the small but comfortable room. At first, I assumed the injection must be a hallucinogen, though I wouldn't have known that word then. The changes hadn't advanced far enough. But I began to have vivid memories. The earliest memories were violent and confused. Fights between animals that looked like nothing I had ever seen on a green world that might have been Earth but wasn't. The images slowly became more coherent, and the fights less common. I won every fight. I wouldn't have memories if I had lost, though I had some of the memories of the losers. But it takes time to encode memories, so those last minutes were always lost. That was an understanding that came later. Soon, the memories began to expand. There was still no language, but there was a slow growth of understanding, and a millenniums-long competition between its kind. And after each fight, I would devour my opponent. It gave me physical subsistence, just like the creatures on Earth, but also understanding. A growth of knowledge just like what was happening to me, though I did not understand that. As time went on, I caught glimpses of myself in pools of water, and much later, on smooth pieces of metal taken from a defeated opponent. Each time I looked different, but always similar. I was large, with a mouthful of long vicious teeth, dark tanned leathery skin and feathers instead of hair. The exact nature of their evolution is still a mystery, but what I understood was that the memories were passed down not only from generation to generation, but through blood, so that each battle and each birth expanded the knowledge of the species, until they learned to expand beyond the boundaries of their own world, while never having learned to work together. There were more flashes of battles, but this time it was between me and creatures of all shapes and sizes. Creatures who had learned to cooperate, and barely defended themselves. There was a great disappointment, as I devoured them. The rush of knowledge was a trickle, and most of it made no sense. But unlike those I had defeated in the past, there were many of them, and slowly my machines grew more complex and powerful. Soon my prey began to flee at the sight of me. I caught some, but I soon discovered it was easier to seek their nests. Huge worlds filled with nearly endless prey. I would land, gorge myself until I knew all I could learn from them, then move on to the next. This seemed to last forever. A slow progression across space and time. I knew countless numbers of my siblings and other selves were destroyed. I had no memories of those, only of those who succeeded or who I had defeated. Then there was something new. A blue-green world. Its knowledge was barely worth the effort, but I felt hunger, so I moved towards that world. From this point on, I see everything twice. One has no language, nothing but a hunger and the desires of instinct, but it is me. But the other is also me, and I embrace it because it has language and its mind is closer to that of Ella Bell, a name that I barely remember. I am the devouring beast. Alone, powerful, and never defeated. I am a 32-year-old woman, smart and quick, but quite aware that I am outmatched. I have watched my friends die as they attacked the spaceship that had arrived with no warning, and attacked without mercy. I am furious, as I see the creatures begin to invade my home. I know they are different. Not prey like so many others, but willing to fight. I am exhilarated by the battle. I am a woman who believes in peace and reason. I am terrified, and feel powerless as I see the others get cut down in the attack. I am injured. Pierced by pieces of metal, but I know I can win. I am in pain, and yet rush towards the small, dark-haired woman in padded white armor that will not protect her. I am a woman in a spacesuit, watching a 7-foot-tall alien rush at her. I draw my gun and begin to fire. The weapon of the creature in front of me is primitive. So primitive that the defensive measures of the ship do not disable the weapon. But I have been struck with weapons before. I move forward, but one attack hit me in the side where I have been injured before. The monster in front of me stops as I keep pulling the trigger, even after my gun has run out of bullets. There is no expression on his face I can recognize, but a liquid that is likely blood begins to pour out of its side. It continues forward, knocking me to the ground, and blood covers me. The creature continues to attack, cutting through my spacesuit and into my side, but it is getting weaker quickly. I continue to attack, but I am getting weaker. I cut through the pathetic armor, but it continues to fight. It was pushing upward with its strong legs, keeping me from reaching it. My life drains quickly from my side. The blood gets everywhere. It tastes of iron and rotten eggs. It is thick and stings when it gets into my wounds, but I can't care about that. I focus on keeping the creature's fingers from around my neck, and its teeth from biting me. As I push, its strength wanes. After that, the memories become more coherent. A single thread again. I don't know why that one moment was different. I can only assume it was the interaction of human and alien blood. From there I live human lives. I am the first Reina, generations from becoming Empress, but something both more and less. A hero like the world has never seen. There are parades and interviews, offers to run businesses and marriage proposals. And as it is happening, there is a process happening to Reina that is also happening to Ella, but for Reina it is much slower. She is slowly integrating thousands of years of instinct and learning. I understand the alien ship in orbit in a way no one else does. I understand technology thousands of years more advanced than anything built by humanity, and yet built with the same instinct a bird builds, making it almost impossible to teach others. It is overwhelming and exhilarating. Reina feels alone in a way no human ever has, but feels no loss in that solitude because almost every memory she has is of that solitude. An eternity of being alone, and never having been bothered by it. But Reina is also not alone. She is married and soon she has a child. But the child is unique. Those memories of a childhood, and of the growth of the memories of being her own mother and a strange alien creature haunt her. Yet she is not alone in the way her mother was, or in the way that the creature was, or even in the way that Ella Bell is. Her mother sees and understands what has happened. Together, they hide what the child is. I feel the emotions of that. The fear of being caught, the shame of hiding, and the strange disconnected connection that Ella felt as well. But they found the solution together. Since Reina II already understood everything her mother did when she was born, she focused on those things her mother didn't know. Biology was the obvious choice, and Ella's understanding of it proved she had studied it well. There were more generations of study and growth, though after Reina I, none of the children were biological descendant of Reina. I was too distant from humanity for romance, and a simple blood injection was far easier than carrying a child for 9 months. You could also give blood many years after having a child was impossible, so far less knowledge was lost. Through all of it, Ella struggled to remember who she was. At first, even remembering I had a name had been difficult. But even once the concept of a name became one I understood again, it was hard to remember that I wasn't Reina. There were more memories, but they were less dramatic. Lifetimes of study each in a different field of math, science and engineering. There was also the slow rise to power, as members of her family grew in understanding of more of the alien science and technology no one else could understand, allowing them to gather both power and wealth. I looked around the room as I tried to slow the influx of ideas and hold on to myself. The room had been trashed. The walls were padded, and yet I had done a great deal of damage without knowing I had moved at all. The table I had been on had been overturned, and one of the metal legs removed. I had used that leg to tear away most of the padding around the door. The one part of the room that I hadn't damaged at all was the small padded door in the middle of the wall across from the door. It was invisible, the edge of the door matching the patterns of the paddings. But I didn't need to see it. I had memories of seeing it. I twisted one of the padded buttons, and then pushed it in. There was a click, and a thick door opened. Behind it was a computer and keyboard. It was antique technology that no one used anymore, but I had spent lifetimes using it, and logged into the computer using a password that no one except my predecessor had known. It brought up a long list of questions. After answering just a couple of them, I found questions no one who didn't have the Empress's memories could answer. It seemed unnecessary. A simple door code would have done the same thing, but I didn't really care. It was enjoyable to push the limits of the new knowledge as well as convince myself that this was real, and not a psychotic break. A concept that was new to me, but that almost explained everything. The test began with simple questions about relativity and math. There were a few people who could answer those besides me. Then the science became more exotic. Things that almost no one would know or care about. As I answered the questions, I pushed deeper into those memories. As I did, they seemed to gain more control. Then I seemed to catch a secret. This was here for me to prove who I was, but it was also here to focus my mind on those things, so that it was easier for the Empress to take over. As I understood that, I walked back over to the bed. I considered flipping it back up, but the mattress in Ella's home was on the floor, so I pulled it off and stuck it in the corner. I then sat on it, and thought about the life of Ella Bell. It was almost impossible when I began. I had to focus on trying to remember the face of my mother. It took me several seconds to get even a fuzzy memory, but once I began to relax, the image became more clear. And with her face, the other parts became more clear. My sister stealing my things, my father rushing off to work, my favorite TV shows and favorite food. While I considered that, music began to play. I searched for the speakers but couldn't see them. Not that it was offensive music. It was just that it was the Empress's favorite song. A song I had listened to so many times that I knew it as well as my mother's face. And it was connected to hundreds of other memories. One of those was the point of this entire endeavor. They wanted me to become part of their line. To keep me like them, to ensure their immortality. The test, the music, even the empty room was designed to make their memories dominant in the first few vital hours. But knowing that made this something different. It wasn't just a difficult transition. It was a battle for my soul. I considered trying to cover my ears so I couldn't hear the music, but it seemed too childish and I knew I was being watched. They might try something more drastic. So instead I tried something drastic. 3 versions of myself ago, one of the Reina had learned to meditate. It seemed absurd to use a skill from those memories to fight the memories, but I could not drive them all away. I didn't even want to. The memories were useful, and it would be stupid to drive them all away. I just needed to hold on to myself. Meditation wasn't what many people assumed. I didn't drive away all thought, or become one with anything. I just worked to calm and control my mind and body. With that, I began to sort through the memories. I didn't categorize them as mine or theirs because they were all mine. Whether I liked it or not, those memories were me. But I kept Ella Bell alive. Her own memories were sequestered and given weight over the others. I knew given time, the others would become equal, but that time would allow Ella to become a part of the Empress, and not just a few forgotten childhood memories. I do not know how long that took. Meals were brought, each of them the Empress's favorite foods. I ignored them, and insisted on the things Ella liked. Cheap macaroni and cheese out of the box, Pop-Tarts and cheese pizza. I expected them to argue with me. But it turned out that even though I was being held until I could prove my mind was ready, I was still the Empress, and they gave me what I wanted. So I sat at the computer eating microwaved fish sticks, and answering questions about technology most people on Earth had never even heard of. Technology created on other worlds, and absorbed by an alien from an even more distant world. But this time, remembering them didn't threaten to destroy Ella. They were simply memories of facts. The test turned out to be several hundred questions longer than I expected, each more difficult, and each making it clearer just how much I had gained. But through all of it, I avoided losing any more of Ella. When I put the last answer into the computer, I pushed the finish button. The ancient computer calculated the test, and showed that I had one answer wrong. I was confused. The test was simple. Every answer had been simple. Most of them were things that the Empress had spent lifetimes studying. But when I told the computer to show me the wrong answer, it only took me to the first page. There weren't even questions here. I was going to have to start over, and do the entire quiz again. It wouldn't take long, but my willpower to hold on to myself meant that I'd need to wait and refocus. Then I saw something at the top. There was a question on this page. It read, "What is your name?" I had entered Empress Reina. I changed it to Ella Bell. I then scrolled to the bottom of the screen and clicked the Submit Answers button. There was another few second delay as the ancient computer considered my answers, and then a cheerful green message appeared in the center of the screen. It read, "Congratulations, you have passed." I heard the loud click of a lock being disengaged. So I got up and walked to the door. It opened smoothly and the guard who had brought me food kneeled. "None of that. At least not in private," I said. I knew that in public, there were going to be some rituals that had to be followed. Humans liked their rituals. The hallway extended out in both directions. It was white and clear, and lined with doors similar to the one that I had just stepped out of. I knew now that I wasn't as special as I had first assumed. Lots of people looked like the Empress, and almost anyone could be given memories. I also knew which way to go, so I turned left. Thinking how you couldn't keep secrets from yourself, but knowing that you could. Many people did. I felt bad for the girls in all those other rooms. Girls who would lose themselves entirely. There was a place for them. They wouldn't be the Empress, but they'd spend their lives using the knowledge they had gained. They were dead branches. Not allowed to create new versions, because they had failed the one test that they had to pass. But not treated poorly. At the end of the hallway, there was one last door. Bigger than the others and unlocked. I walked into it, without knocking. You didn't need to knock to walk into a room with yourself. There, sitting behind a huge wooden desk, was Empress Reina, the 6th ruler of the United Earth. She had grey hair that hung around her shoulders and her face cracked as she smiled, but even at her age she looked like Ella. As I walked in, she said,
"I had a good feeling about you, Ella."
"Then why did you try so hard to destroy me?" Ella asked, but I knew the answer to the question as I asked it.
"We needed to be certain that you would remain, Ella. Most lose themselves. The world needs new leaders and new ideas, not the same ones every generation. But it also needs stability. A person who can hold on to themselves while learning of the viciousness and secrets of the world will be that person."
"And why aren't you dead?" Ella asked. I expected that answer to pop into my mind as well, but it didn't.
The blood that made us what we are changed our DNA. We live a long time. So long as I'm alive, I'd never be free to live a normal life. And I don't have to be dead to give blood. So everyone on Earth except for a few select people believes I'm dead. Reincarnated into you. I'm going to retire. Of course I'll be available if you need my advice, but you already know everything I do. Try to be a good Empress. And if you can escape the job without having to fake your own death, all the better."
"Then I have only one last question," Ella asked.
"What is that?"
Reina, the 6th Empress of Earth, asked. "What is your name?"
Author's note. Several years ago, I read a couple of things in quick succession about cooperation, and one of them said that technological advancement was impossible without trade. I don't think the person who said that was wrong. But it felt like a challenge, so I began to think about a way a species could evolve so that it could have meaningful technology while remaining solitary and territorial. I didn't create the idea of genetic memory. Stargate certainly had it, and I doubt they were the first. But it created a fun story. The idea of a species that remembered everything that had happened to it throughout its entire evolutionary history was interesting, but the sharing of ideas still seemed important, so I included the idea that the knowledge could be transferred by ingesting other members of its species. It would still take time, but technological advancement has only sped up on Earth recently. But that didn't have any real conflict, so it sat on the shelf in the back of my mind for years, popping up occasionally, but never with anything more interesting than an alien invasion story. That a human would be infected with it came around fairly early, but it still didn't quite have a real story. Last week the final piece clicked. When I realized the main conflict of the story would be about holding onto your identity while being flooded with memories, I finally had a story I could tell, one that kept the other parts of the story important and made the story more cohesive. I also wanted to stretch myself a little in the writing of this story. Sometimes I allow myself to become complacent in my writing. After so many years of writing, that is both inevitable and not entirely a bad thing. The speed I can write is largely because I've done it a long time and know what works for me. I hope that the section where she is telling the story from a first-person perspective while being two different characters in conflict made sense and was fun to read because I enjoyed writing it. If it was, then you can sign up for my newsletter at www.anscifi.com and get a free short story every week. Finally, I'd like to thank all of my patrons. Me being able to take the extra time to experiment and hopefully write better stories is largely because of them. If you'd like to be one of them and get access to stories earlier and a growing number of exclusive stories, you can get access at any level of support. Thank you. Elton Gar.